Hi everyone and welcome to Flipping Heck Business, Flip Learning for AQA A-Level Business Studies. We are now on video number 2 of Unit 4, Decision Making to Improve Operational Performance. Okay, so this is taken from Unit 3.4, which is Decision Making to Improve Operational Performance. So things we're going to be looking at is calculation of unit costs, interpretation of unit costs, relationship between unit costs and scale of production, and nature of operations. Now, when you're doing any of your 25 mark questions or 16 mark questions, anything with like evaluation in, to get those higher marks, you need to think about what you could actually link this to. So in your chains of analysis, you want to be looking at things like economies of scale, labor productivity, capital intensity, profit margin, and capital utilization, because they can all be linked through to your unit cost. Now the formula for this is average cost per unit equals total production cost in a period divided by the total output in a period. So quite nice and easy that really, isn't it? You just take the however much it cost you to actually like produce everything and then divide it by however many you made. Okay, so looking at how costs change with output. So we've got an example here where a company has fixed costs of £20,000 and variable cost is £20 per unit. So we keep it nice and simple. So if we were looking at like just one unit, then it would be £20,000 because you got the fixed cost. You have to pay that. It doesn't change depending on output. And then you would just times your output by the variable cost per unit. So in this case, it would be 1 times £20, which equals £20, which gives us total cost of £20,020. So if we've got that, we do total cost divided by the number of units. Then we've got £20,020 is our cost per unit, because all those costs have to always be paid. And then, of course, it starts to change once we start upping how many products we're actually making. So at 50 units, we've still got our fixed costs. They still need to be paid. They're not changing depending on output. Times £20 per unit. So 50 times 20 equals 1,000. So our total costs now are £21,000, which means that our cost per unit has dropped to £420. And of course, it keeps going down. Oh, with 100, again, you would times that by the variable cost per unit. So 100 times variable cost per unit of £20 equals £2,000. So add our two costs together, we get £22,000. We divide by the output per units, gives us 220. And all of a sudden now you can see that it's actually dropping quite severely, isn't it? If you keep going and keep going, then what happens is, of course, that all of your costs get spread. So your fixed costs end up being spread across multiple units. So that £20,000, where we had one unit, well, one made unit had to help pay off that £20,000 in fixed costs. Whereas you drop all the way down to 1,000 there, 1,000 units are helping to pay off the £20,000, which of course is £20. Add your variable cost per unit equals £40 per unit. So this is where we kind of get what we call an economies of scale. The more that you produce, then the cheaper the cost per unit. So economies of scale is basically where higher an output of a business, the cheaper the unit costs, like I just said. And here you can see we've got an example here. So this is what it could look like if it was illustrated. Thanks very much to you for this. So average cost per unit going up the side, and then our quantity of output along the bottom. We can see AC1, then the output is quite low. They're not producing very much, which means that our average cost per unit is very high. And then as they start to produce more, again, the fixed costs get spread over more and more units. So you can see that at quarter 2, then the prices per unit, the cost per unit has dropped severely. At quarter 3, then we have actually seen a bit of a dip, and then what can happen after that is that you'll actually find that the cost go back up again. Now that could be our diseconomies of scale. Now economies of scale, basically things get cheaper as you produce more, And then our diseconomies of scale is where they can actually get more expensive. Now that could be through anything such as, like say you need to hire in more workers, you need to buy new machinery, your fixed costs end up going up. And that will occur, and it can cause the price to rise again. And of course, then it'll go up and down, up and down. So you need to make sure that, remember, it doesn't just get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper until basically it's free. Like it can actually go back up again as well. So there are two different types of economies of scale. So we've got internal, which is arise from the increased output of the business itself, and then there are external, which occur within an industry. So all competitors could actually benefit. So here we've got purchasing. So these are all internal. So purchasing, these are to do with discounts. So big businesses can negotiate a bigger discount when buying supplies in large quantities. They can get bigger discounts, longer credit periods than smaller competitors, and they can also borrow more money at lower rates of interest. So I mean, think about it as Kellogg's. If a little shopkeeper wanted to go up and buy a box of Kellogg's from Kellogg's, then they don't have a lot of buying power. They're going to go up and go, right, well, I'd like to buy 5 boxes or 10 boxes. Kellogg's won't really give them any kind of discount. Whereas if you were Tesco and you went to Kellogg's, then of course you're going to say, right, well, I'm going to buy 1,000,000 boxes. Well, I'm not going to pay the going rate. I want to get it cheaper. Here's a guaranteed amount that I am buying, and they would be able to negotiate a lot lower a price, which then they can put their markup on. That's where they make the profit. Then you've got technical. So this is related to production. So production methods for large volumes are often more efficient. Large businesses can afford to buy better, more advanced machinery, which might mean fewer staff, meaning wage costs will fall. So again, here we could see companies going more automated, which is a one-off fixed cost, and then of course their variable costs can fall, or their wage factor can fall. And don't forget that wages and salary tend to be the biggest expense in a business. Marketing, so because marketing is fixed, I mean you just get a marketing budget, then if you've got a large output, then you spread again that cost over everything. It brings the cost per unit with regards to marketing down as well. Financial, so as we said before, you can get better discounts, easier credit, and the availability of loans from banks. They'll be much more willing to loan you money if you know that they've got 20 million pounds in assets than again a small shop who might only have a few thousand or tens of thousands. And then specialism as well. So able to hire and attract more skilled and specialist staff. Which would you rather work at? The internet cafe down the road, or would you rather work at Google? So of course they're going to be able to attract the better people, but of course they've got to be skilled. Now those skilled people tend to be much more productive. They might be able to produce faster, they might be able to design faster, so therefore again they're going to bring the unit cost down there. So when we're looking at resource intensity, so this is linked to unit costs. So we've got labor and we've got capital. Now labor is obviously the workforce itself. Now capital, when we say capital, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking of capital resources as just money. So I mean, for example, when you think of selling shares, then people think, right, well, it's to raise capital. Well, yes, it is capital, but capital is a resource. It is not just money. You've got to think of anything that you would use and could then be sold for a business. So where they could raise money. So again, like I've just said, so labor intensive is one which relies more on people than machines. So service industries, the hotel industry, creative businesses, so art studios, they are all very labor intensive. Anything that is really face to face with another human. Then we've got capital intensive, and this is where again you've got to stop thinking of capital as just money. It's one where you might need large amounts of capital, e.g. equipment, machinery, buildings, vehicles in order to run. So we've got capital intensive businesses like car factories where there are many expensive items of machinery, robots, conveyor belts. You've got anything that might be in the service industry, not service industry, the technological industry, so servers. See where I made the mistake, or transport, where a lot of trains are maybe moving towards just having one driver or even no drivers, or very intensive arable farming. So things big wheat fields where maybe in labor intensive you would need a single person picking strawberries or something like that, but in like a big wheat field where you can just bring everything up, you need big multiple combine harvesters and that kind of thing. So again, labor intensive. So capital refers to equipment, machinery, vehicles, and so on that the vehicle uses to make its product or service. Sorry, capital intensive. So capital intensive processes are those that require high level of capital investment compared to the labor cost. Again, so we're looking at like getting a lot of machinery in as opposed to having people. Capital is a long-term investment for most businesses, and the cost of financing, maintaining, and depreciation on the equipment represents a large, substantial overhead. So it could cost you an awful lot to set up. Right? In order to maximize efficiency, firms want their capital investment to be fully utilized. Right? And so make your own notes on capital utilization. And then in the capital intensive process, it can be costly and time consuming to increase or decrease the scale of production. I mean, like once you've got a machine in and you've got a building and it's full of that machine, then if you do want to up your scale, then you're going to have to buy either another factory, and you're going to have to buy the machine, you're going to then have to find people to work it. It can become very, very, very costly when you want to like increase. Whereas with labor intensive, so that refers to the people required to carry out the process in a business. So labor intensive processes are those that require relatively high level of labor compared to capital. So you're looking at people, not machines. And then these processes are likely to be used to produce individual or personalized products and to produce on a small scale. So, if you want something that is bespoke or you want something handmade, now a machine is great for producing something over and over again, repeatedly, whereas something that is personalized will require someone with a little bit more skill, or you wouldn't want to invent a machine that would produce monogram pillows that a person could actually sew when you're only doing say one or two variants of that particular product. Labour costs are wages and other benefits, recruitment, training, etc. Some flexibility and capacity may be available by use of overtime and temporary staff, or by laying off workers. So if you do need to sort of say you're a seasonal fruit farmer, so you might have strawberries in the summer, so you can actually hire people in. Your costs and everything will go up, but they are there for a purpose. And then at the end of the season, you would just let those staff go, and you would carry on, and your labor costs would come down again. And then long-term growth depends on being able to recruit sufficient suitable staff. So if you wanted to expand and you're very labor intensive, then actually it's all about training and hiring the right people, as opposed to going out and buying a big fancy machine. So implications of resource intensity for unit costs. So if you're labor intensive, then this is where labor costs are higher than capital costs. Costs are mainly variable, so it means that you end up with a much lower break-even output. We'll be looking at that in finance. Firms benefit then from access to sources of lower cost labor. So you can actually hire lower cost labor if it's not required specialists. Then capital intensive, that's where the capital costs are higher than labor costs. So costs are mainly fixed, which means that it's a high break-even output. But then firms benefit from access to low-cost long-term financing. So you can either hire cheap labor or you can get better finance. So the benefits of capital intensive is that it's great opportunity for economies of scale. You can do a lot more with it. Potential for significantly better productivity. So machines should be working faster than a person, and there you go. You better quality and speed depending on the product. So if it's something that is just something that can be churned out, then you might find that your product, your speed that you can do it, and your quality will be very high. And of course then it has low labor costs as well, which, as I said, is one of the more expensive regular payments that a company has to give. But it does require significant investment. You do need to put the money in at the beginning. There's a potential for loss of competitiveness due to obsolescence. So in other words, if your obsolescence is where your machinery goes out of date, so if a new machine comes out and your competitors have bought it, then it could be, right, well, if you can't afford to buy it there and then, they're going to be able to produce more, offer better quality, quicker, right? So you need to actually start thinking about, well, I need to buy that as well, so what am I going to do with the old equipment, etc., etc. And then it may generate resistance to change from a labor force. If you are sat there and the company comes along and goes, we've got great news, guys, we brought this machine in. Bad news is that we're sacking 40% of the workforce. Well, you're going to lose friends. If you're not the one who's actually going to get fired, you might lose your friends, you might lose your buddies, you might not want to work this way. If you've been working with a particular machine for like 10, 15 years, then you might not want to change to a new one. And then benefits and drawbacks of labor intensity. So unit costs may still be low in low wage locations is definitely a benefit. If you're like only having to pay your workers quite a small amount, then you're bringing your unit cost down. Labor is a flexible resource, so you can multi-skill, you can train people, you can have people working in other areas, you can utilize them properly. That's the goal of HR. Labor at the heart of the production process can help with continuous improvement. A machine can't necessarily tell you, oh, you're doing this wrong. Have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? Whereas a person can. Drawbacks, though, are that there's greater risk of problems with employee and employer relationship. Not everybody gets along. Potentially high costs of labor turnover. So think about like recruitment, hiring, if there's any kind of payouts that might need to occur because, like, say someone's been injured or sick days. And there is need for continuous investment in training as well. So, if you are changing your product in any way, you're going to have to actually give these workers the training that they need, and that could be a big cost. Okay, thank you very much for watching. So make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, turn on your notifications, and video number 3 in Unit 3.4 will follow very shortly.